Hello everyone. So we're going to be shooting the Nightforce 2.5 to 20 by 50 scope, okay? So let's shoot this out. We're going to be shooting at 200 yards and then I'll give you guys my thoughts after having been working with this now for about 3 days. So I've been working with this now for about 3 days. Okay, so if you guys saw the first video that I did on this Nightforce 2.5 to 20 on the first day, and that was done over like different parts of that video all throughout the different parts of the day. And you can see in that video that as I get towards the end of the video, I'm starting to like the scope more and more. Okay, well, 3 days later, I like the scope a whole lot more. Okay, so first let me say this, and there's two sides to this when you're looking at these type of scopes. There's the hardware side, right, which is basically the lenses and the mechanics of the scope, and then there's what I refer to as the software side, which is the reticle. Okay, so that's how I break down my analysis usually. So on the hardware side, first of all, I really like this concept of a 2.5 to 20, okay, because you just got a very wide range of magnification. Now usually when I'm shooting 1,000 yards, I usually go out there with a 5 to 25. So a lot of times what I'll do is I actually got to bring back the magnification to 20 or maybe even 15 so I can spot the impacts. So having a max magnification of 20 to get to 1,000 yards, I mean, that works out pretty good, okay? So on the low side, you got a 2.5 magnification. And the main goal there, the main thing I'm trying to accomplish with that is I want to avoid having to put a red dot on top of the optic, okay? Because I really don't like doing that. It's extra weight, it's extra snag, snag hazard. I don't like having a red dot on top of the scope. Now, with this scope here, right, even when I'm in 2.5, I can't, like if I'm in it, right, I can't just stay in the scope and scan, right, because it gets disorienting. So what I have to do is, like, I have to see my target, get up on it, take my shot, come down, go to the next target, come up, get my shot, come down, okay? Right, so I can't stay in the scope and just scan like this because the 2.5 is still very disorienting. On my LPVOs, I've even tried going down to 1.5, and even 1.5 is very disorienting if you're in the scope and you're just trying to scan like that. Okay, even with a 1.5, you gotta come down and come back up. Okay, so basically, if you want to stay in the scope and be able to scan, you need an LPVO that goes down to 1x. Okay, so the 2.5 doesn't help us in that respect. Where it does help us is like, for example, here today I'm shooting 200 yards. You know, I'm able to zoom down to 2.5. You know, I got that wide field of view so I can see my target, right? We're 200 yards back in these woods, right? Which basically involves a little bit of hunting. So I need that low magnification in order for me to be able to find it. Because if I have, like if I'm starting off in 5 magnification, sometimes it's like, okay, now I need a red dot on top of the scope so I can kind of like just get into the area where I know the target is, and then I'll switch over into the glass. Okay, so that's how the 2.5 is going to help you. Okay, it's not going to help you for doing like CQB type of work. It's a little dizzying. Now, as far as size, I mean, it is. I weighed it the other day. It was just a bit over 2 pounds. Like, I mean, it was close enough to 2 pounds that we could just say it was 2 pounds. I think it was maybe 2 pounds and maybe 2 ounces or something. So 2 pounds. You know, that's with the mounts, the scope, and this mount here, which is also from Nightforce. Okay, 2 pounds. And one of the things I want to do here today, I'm walking back and forth in the woods. You know, setting up the target, coming back here, and I have to shoot off the table because otherwise I don't have enough clearance to see the target, right? So I need it to be a little bit higher. But just walking back and forth in the woods through the snow, I mean, yeah, this thing's a little heavy, okay? You know, that extra, because most of my LPVOs are either like the most, they're like 1.5 pounds. Most of them are a little bit under 1.5 pounds. That extra ½ pound, yeah, it makes a difference, right? Especially when you add the bipod, it makes a difference. So you're gonna feel it. I'm not saying it's bad. My 5 to 25 is 2.5 pounds. Okay, so that's even less comfortable. But all I'm saying is that you're gonna feel that extra ½ pound. But the scope does deliver performance. I mean, it's you know, I mean, it works well. As far as the turrets, it has the 0 stop, right? I did a video the other day where I was setting it in the first video so I can dial up and then go back to my 0. In the first video, I said that the turrets fell a little bit on the mushy side. You know what? It's one of those things that it just kind of grows on you and you're not even going to think about it. The turrets are fine. I mean, they're very good. So the turrets are very fine. No issue there. Let's see, anything else on the hardware? Oh, I had said the throw lever. I said it could have been a little bit bigger. I would have liked if they gave us 2 throw levers, a short one like this, and one that was maybe a little bit bigger, maybe twice as big, right? You know what? I've been working with this today. I mean, this throw lever is of a decent size. I mean, now that has to be paired up, I guess, against how much resistance you have as this magnification dial is rotating. So, I mean, because if it's very stiff, then you need a bigger throw lever to be able to move it, okay? So these two are matched up pretty good, where, you know, there's not too much resistance there, so the throw lever is just enough that you can get your work done. So that's pretty good. That grew on me, okay? Because, you know, like I said, when you shoot a lot of different optics, lots of different scopes, sometimes you get used to one thing, and then when you get on something else, it's like, oh, okay, if you work on it for a couple of days, you're going to get very comfortable with this. You're going to like the throw lever. You're going to like the way it turns. You're going to like the turrets. The other thing I was complaining about in the first video was the illumination button, right? So this thing it doesn't have a dial, right, where you pick your different brightness settings. It has a button here on the side, right over here, that you cycle through. Okay, so I thought about that a little bit, and the fact is that usually when I'm shooting, I don't use the illumination, right? I usually just use the etched reticle. The only time I use illumination is if I'm shooting like into the evening, where I really need to be able to, you know, when I need that illumination. Otherwise, I'm not using it. For something that I use so infrequently on this type of a scope, right? I think this button where you're cycling through the different settings works fine. I think the benefit of it is that it probably makes the scope cheaper, right? In the sense that because that dial is more moving parts, And then what happens is a lot of times each brightness setting is a different, like there's a different connector for each one, and then sometimes what can happen is one of those connectors wears out. So it's like what happens is like a one or two brightness settings stop working, but the other ones work. So I've seen that on over the years on red dots and scopes. That's why the dial is an issue. That's why most companies have moved to the digital ones, because they're just they don't break as frequently. Okay, so considering all that, and also considering that, yeah, I really don't use the illumination all that much. This button setting here for the illumination, I think that works fine. Okay, so that's not an issue. Okay, so far I'm liking everything up on the hardware. Okay, I didn't particularly like. I wish they didn't have these Frankenstein bolts here, because this scope is going to ultimately end up on a SCAR 17. So if you have a charging, so if you have a rifle with a side, that's a side charger, and that side charge is on the same side as these Frankenstein bolts, your knuckles are going to be hitting up against the bolts. So that can be an issue. The nice thing is on the SCAR you can flip it to to either side, but on some rifles you may not have that option. So I would rather that instead of having the Frankenstein bolts here, they had just like maybe 4 star screws, right? I think that would have been better, right? Because you can have like 4 big star screws, right? So that they're really strong, and so that's why. So I would have preferred like three or 4 star screws. So I don't love this the scope mount design that they have on this. Okay. Now on the software side, on the reticle, in the first video that I did, I showed you guys a look inside the scope. I attached my camera adapter. So now again, I didn't buy this scope. They do offer this with different reticles. The person that bought this ordered it with a very plain one. Okay. The issue is that it doesn't have a drop-down Christmas tree, so it can be, if you're self-spotting, it can be hard to see where the impacts are or the splashes, so that you can self-correct. However, it's not impossible. It'll just take you 2 or 3 extra shots, because what will happen is you'll get a sense of where you're splashing. All right, so if you see it splashing down, let's say somewhere on the let's say somewhere down around the 10 MOA, and then right 4, right? It may not be exact, so you'll dial up like maybe 7 or something, and you'll hold left maybe 2, and then you'll see where you splash. So you'll get there, right? You'll get there. So that's not an issue. Now the other, I looked on Nightforce's website. They do offer other reticles that have that Christmas tree reticle. The other ones seem to be of the Tremor style, right? Or the Tremor 3 style, which has a lot of information in there, right? So I think that's a little bit too much information. So I really like the Primary Arms ACSS reticles, like the one I got in my 5 to 25, because those are like, that drop-down tree is 1 by 1 mil, okay? And I find that shooting out to 1,000 yards, that's like kind of perfect, where you've got dots as reference points, but you don't have so many dots that you lose track of, okay, which dot did I splash on. So what I would like to see, let's say I'd like to see 1 by 1 mil dots, or in this case, because this is an MOA scope, I guess I would like maybe 2 by 2 MOA dots, right? So I think that would probably work out a lot better as far as a drop-down Christmas tree on this reticle, okay? But yeah, I'm really liking the scope. I mean, I do think it's a little overpriced at the $2,000 that they're asking for. I'd like to see it like closer to $1,000 or below $1,000, but it is what it is. If you take the price out of the equation, I think it's a really nice scope. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't pick an MOA. I'd pick mil. But I mentioned this in the first video. The main thing with that is, like, you gotta see what the people that you're shooting with, what they're using, because essentially you both gotta be talking the same language. So if you're using mils and your buddies are using MOA, that's gonna get confusing. So you want to use whatever the people that you're shooting with are using. Okay, so if they're using MOA, get an MOA scope. If you're all using mils, get a mil scope. If you're not shooting with other people, and so that's not an issue, I would probably recommend you go with the mils, because that's what like the military guys use, and a lot of times they're teaching the classes, so they're going to teach it in something that they know, which is going to be mils. And also lots of competition shooters are gravitating over towards mils. So that's so if you're not shooting with other people that are shooting that are using MOA, I would go with the mils. Now in the first video that I did a whole, I went through the whole thing about how to use it for range estimating. So you should see that first video if you haven't seen it. So you use the MOA for both range estimating and also for spotting your impacts and making adjustments, okay? This scope now, today I'm shooting an AR-47, right? So this is 7.62 by 3.9. In most cases, you're probably going to have this scope either on the 5.56 or on a 308 gun, okay? So in those cases, like I already know my holds, right? So with a 50 yard zero, 50/200 yard zero, right? Basically, point of aim, point of impact on your center aiming point. At 300 yards, it's 1 mil up, right? So I would dial either 1 mil up, or in this case, I would dial 3.5 MOA, okay? At 400 yards, it's a 2 mil hold. So here I would dial 6.5 MOA up, okay? At 500 yards, it's a 3 mil hold. So here I would dial basically 10 MOA up, okay? Now past 500 yards, you gotta put the shots out there and spot your impacts and self-correct, because after 500 yards, right? That's when like the different ammunition, different barrel lengths, different ammo speeds. They those small what's normally a very small difference inside of 500 yards starts becoming a bigger difference past 500 yards. So you basically have to collect that data, on what your holds need to be. One more thing worth noting on this reticle, the center aim point on this is a cross, okay? And the thing that I noticed after like shooting for a while with this, right, where I had the cross on the target, the cross can become very disorienting, because you got a cross there and then you got lines above and lines to the side, and it's almost like watching a bunch of zebras running, where the lines kind of start crisscrossing and getting confusing, okay? So I like the center aiming point to be something different. Like the chevron is nice because the chevron is a point, and it's very different from anything around it. So when I look at it, I know exactly where my center aiming point is, okay? So I really like the ACSS reticle for that. It's just that center aiming point is vastly different than everything else, and I use that fine tip to zero in, right? The other thing is a lot of times they'll use a dot. Okay, the dot I think is better than the cross, but also same deal with the dot. I mean, the dot doesn't give you the fine aiming point of the tip of a chevron. Okay, so those are my thoughts after having worked with the scope now for about 3 days, and as you can see, it's covered by snow. So yeah, it's one thing when you're shooting and using the scope like in the summertime in an open field, where you just pulling the gun out of a truck and you're walking whatever 5 or 10 feet over to a bench. It's another thing when you're out in the woods going, like today, going 200 yards one way, 200 yards the other way. You start to really get a sense for the weight of the gun, and what it's what it's like to use it like in a more realistic type of situation. Okay, so I'm gonna probably do a few more videos on this as I continue working with the scope. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all soon. I wanted to take a look at that group that I just shot. So that was at 200 yards. Okay. Tape measure out. So that's an AR-47. So it shoots 7.62 by 3.9. Shooting Red Army standard. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots. The ones without the holes. The ones with the holes I shot earlier. I mean, I completely bombed that group. So the 5 shots that I just shot, 4 inches at 200 yards. So that's 2 MOA. Now normally I take the best 4 out of 5 because a lot of times I'll throw the shot. So the best 4 out of 5 is 3 inches AR-47. So 3 inches, 1.5 MOA with steel case. And basically that rifle's been shooting between 1 MOA and 1.5 MOA since I got it. So you know, it's you know, you can make steel case work for you. So I mean using the AR-47 because I wanted something that had a little bit more recoil, since this is going to end up on a SCAR 17. So you know, if you're shooting a 308, that tends to be a lot more expensive. So I wanted to get as much shooting. You know, basically I wanted to learn the scope first with cheaper ammunition before I mounted it on a 308 gun. But yeah, this thing's shooting pretty good. And this is without a bag in the back, right? Because if you guys saw when I was shooting it, I was shooting off a bipod in the front, right? Which was kind of slipping and sliding on that table, which had like ice on it in the front. And then on the back side, I didn't have a bag. So normally if I had a bag in the back, this would have been a 1-inch group. Like guaranteed. Because I could see I was moving a little bit when I was shooting it. Right, there's 20. Let's see if I can adjust the parallax a little bit. All right, I can see that the illumination is still on. Let me see if I can get this illumination off. Yeah. Yeah. Get it off. Yeah, so that's the thing with this button design. There you go. I finally got it off. This button design is that you may have some difficulty getting this to do what you want it to do. So you see what I meant about earlier about how you use that box to center up your cross inside the box, right? You can see the bullet holes. So that's at 100 yards, and you can see the bullet holes. Again, that's the target I shot earlier. So I really prefer Chevron, where I just put the tip under under like a solid bullseye. I usually get really good accuracy. This does not have a grid underneath it for helping you self spot your impacts. So if you have, like, let's say a whole bunch of dots underneath it, what happens is if you see a splash on a particular dot, right, you would just transfer that to the target. So for example, if I'm shooting and I see that I got a splash at the 10 MOA line, well then my next shot's going to be right there. Like, I'm not even going to bother with the dial. I'm just going to move 10 MOA onto the target and just take my shots. So that's fine if it's directly underneath it, right? So like I said, from here, if I see a splash at 10 MOA, I go there, right? But what if it's like out here somewhere? Shit, how am I supposed to, you know? So that's where it's really useful to have some holding points underneath. So that's the disadvantage of this reticle design. Right now we're back to 2.5. Let's see what the parallax looks like here. It's kind of hard to tell through the camera where I gotta parallax this. Yeah, if those leader lines out at the edges were a little bit thicker, it would really help. Because once you zoom in, they kind of disappear out of your field of view. So there's no reason why those outer lines can't be, like, you know, really thick, so it can help you get on target faster, you know, in an up close type of situation.